Hello and welcome all of you once again to the 16th edition of India Digital Summit. Hope you found the sessions interesting and insightful during the day. Now let's move towards the another panel discussion on an important topic of prioritizing innovative technologies to create and maintain enduring downstream space applications. But before we start, we would like to thank our digital financial management partner EasyBuzz, conversational messaging partner GupShup, session partner GoQuick, gold partners Manorama Online, Blink Digital, and Yellow.ai, and silver partner ShareChat. To start the discussion, let me welcome our moderator, Mr. Sanjay Kumar, founder and CEO, Geospatial World. Now, welcoming the panelists, Mr. Syed Peer Muhammad Shah Khadri, co-founder and COO, AgniKul Cosmos, Mr. Suyash Singh, co-founder and CEO, GalaxEye Space, Dr. Narayan Prasad, COO, satsearch. Dear delegates, please keep posting your questions in the chat box. The panel may select a few and address these questions in the end. Over to you, Sanjay.
Very much, Srishti, for introducing our panel, and very good evening to delegates from India, and good afternoon, good evening to delegates who are joining from Europe and West. I'm Sanjay Kumar, and I'm going to be moderator and host of this panel for next couple and 30 to 45 minutes. And I'll take you down through a very interesting discussions about innovative ways of downstreaming or scalability of applications of space infrastructure and space capability, making an impact in the society and economy. Well, before I go to my panelists, let me just share a couple of my thoughts. First of all, space and digital are pretty much two sides of the same coin, and they are the fundamentals of the age which we live in. A space infrastructure, the term which represents the entire ecosystem of space technology, right from satellite launching capabilities to satellite manufacturing, ground stations, processing of data, information. A space infrastructure is something which is very, very critical asset, and it provides three kinds of satellites. A, telecommunication satellites, which helps you communicate. B, positioning satellites, which helps you position anything anywhere. And C, Earth observation satellite, which gives you significant amount of data, which actually captures and images the world and Earth planet regularly. And these sensors are of different kinds, and they provide various kinds of thematic data. And all that data which we collect, we use it along with maps and other ways of information systems to develop applications. And we use GPS in our, or actually technically it is global navigation satellite systems, but more often we use the term GPS, which is kind of inbuilt, component of our living today. So what we are talking about is something which is touching your life almost every day, and it has a serious impact on the way we live in. Beyond this, space is also a very important asset for sovereignty of the nation today, because we live in digital age and we need data, and we need to keep our assets available indigenously as well, so that in case of any emergency situation, we have the foundational information systems available, being developed and available to us. So it's a very important asset of so maintaining your sovereignty as well, and that's why it's a very strategic segment today. If you look at the role of space technology and space infrastructure, I would like to convey that the overall geospatial economy of India today is almost 35,000 crores, out of which almost 50% of that is directly connected with space. And that economy, I'm using the word economy, which includes the market size of India, as well as exports of services from India, and at the same time, the government expenditure on certain sectors. But this economy is likely to grow very fast. Why so? Because in last 2 years, especially, we have gone through very fundamental public policy reforms. Public policy reforms to the extent that as a citizen of the country, you have a right to have a space company. You can launch your satellite. You can have your data. You can, it's just, so it means that you're looking at privatization and commercialization. And when this privatization and commercialization of space is taking place, this is very well augmented by the public policy reforms in the field of UAVs or in the field of geospatial guidelines or in the field of data protection and sovereignty kind of debates. So we are moving towards a direction to make our country more digitally empowered and build our capacities in a manner that we can actually work towards the scalability of applications. Well, today when we are having a esteemed group of panelists and most of them are pretty young, and I find it very exciting to see very young faces on the panel with me. I would like to go through a conversation with them and try to help you understand bit more about the space and its role in our digital strategy. So let me start with Mr. Moin. Moin is the co-founder of a company known as AgniKul. So, and this AgniKul is a company which is developing, launch vehicles upstream of space industry ecosystem. So, Moin, what is actually taking place? What is so innovative about upstream or the space infrastructure at the moment, in your opinion, and how does the government of India's policy help you, expand that capability?
Sure. I think to start with, we need to understand space is 100 kilometers apart. You could have a definition debate about it, but it is at a distance, right? And you need somebody to connect the Earth and space. And this is where the launch vehicles bridge this gap. And without them, you won't have the satellites. You won't have the space infrastructure. This is the first step in the entire process chain. Right, and then after you follow is the space infrastructure where you have the space stations and then you have the payloads and then you have the satellites that are down there, like as you said, for the Earth observation, and then you also have it for communication and for other purposes as well, intelligence and force, and you have so many purposes for what these satellites are supposed to be meant. Now, if you take this on the whole, right, and as I said, it is an economy of its own. It is a thriving economy, right? Before we only had the governments doing it. Now we have the entire world. Every person has the right in the world to actually build something and launch in space and actually extract data, which is the next big thing, right? Ultimately, if you think the space industry is focusing more towards providing data, which is kind of the next big oil or however you could call it as. So this is the next big economy itself. And any country that has been a spacefaring nation for the last few years is trying to develop as much as it could. And India being one, it has been a spacefaring nation for almost 60 years. And we are trying to just build upon that as much as we can. And not only the spacefaring nations, the developing countries and people in the countries that didn't have the spacefaring capabilities before are also trying to be a part of the space economy. So maybe not only by building launch vehicles, maybe they're building spaceports or they're building satellites or they want to do asteroid mining. On the whole, if you see, the entire world is taking space as the next big platform. And the best part of the space is a lot of other companies are trying to start using space as a platform, which is very critical, right, for an economy to survive. You just can't be launching satellites. You just can't be building launch vehicles. That's not the sustainability for an economy for this particular industry. When I say space is being used as a platform, we are seeing pharmaceutical companies trying to do protein crystallization in space or microgravity experiments in space. So and then you have for data storage, for in terms of security, they want to use space as a cooling platform because cooling is absolutely free there. And these kind of novel ideas, or like other industries when they're trying to hinge on to space and ride on it or make it as a platform, we are seeing the space economy is going to sustain for a longer period of time. And India having been built as a credibility of spacefaring nations, we are among the top 5 countries, right? And our space program is actually as solid as you can compare with other countries. And if we are taking that leverage, if we are taking that capabilities and transferring it to the other players in the country as citizens, if we are trying to utilize that, and there is a policy regulating it, that means it's an opportunity for everybody to create something. And I think there are a lot of quotes or many great people have said, when you have an opportunity to do something, that's the first thing that a country is supposed to provide. The rest, the entrepreneurs and the other people can build on it. And that,
Moin, thank you. Moin, just I want to capture your perspectives on the fact that in terms of innovation in launching capabilities, we have now something like a launcher goes and comes back after delivering the satellites in the orbit, or how is it making more affordable and making more accessible to the companies?
so I'm going to demystify this part, okay, and I'm then also going to tell you how innovation is starting to come. So we went to moon in 1969, right? So we actually know how to build rockets as a species. We actually know this. The engineering has been solved, the physics has been solved, and now we are actually trying to build new technologies and incorporating in that. For example, before, the launch vehicles used to be only be built on conventional manufacturing. Now we have something called as 3D printing playing a very key role. What used to take 2 years to build a nozzle or an engine could be done today in less than 12 days, right? Or less than 3 days to build an engine. For our size, we actually do it in 3 days, right? And this kind of gives a leverage for the satellite companies to launch whenever they want. This is something, this is the key critical component, right? When you give an opportunity to someone to launch within 5 days or 6 days, thereby creating reusability as an option. I think you might have heard about SpaceX. That's what they're good at. So they're taking a launch vehicle, they're bringing it back. There is reusability option, which means the vehicle has already proven that it can fly and come back. So your pedigree increases. So that has started coming up. No, recovery also, we've seen multiple number of options. Whereas we've seen somebody trying to recover a launch vehicle through a helicopter. So this has started to come up. And then I see also in terms of batteries, lithium sulfur batteries have been developed for space, and lot of innovation is happening in each component. It's just not manufacturing alone. Each critical component has been trying to see if we can have more innovation in that. So
So what's unique with AgniKul? If you have so much of innovation with the SpaceX and other companies, what's unique which you are trying to address as a startup from India?
So what we are trying to build is vehicle that is capable to, which is scalable and flexible accordingly to the needs of the customer. For example, we are building a small launch vehicle that is capable of carrying 100 kgs of payload. So that's the product that we're building. But the vehicle itself is scalable. For example, if you are a customer and you're building a satellite for let's say 30 kgs, we will be able to launch it. And even if you're building a 300 kg satellite, we will be still be able to launch, which means we have the flexibility to go both up and down the radar. So this kind of gives us the advantage to address all types of customers. And we're also focusing on other areas like, we are incorporating 3D printing, thereby reducing the time for manufacturing itself. So we are targeting a launch in less than 2 weeks. Every time a customer is ready, all that we want to do is be capable of launching in 2 weeks. This is how we are different.
Hey, thank you, Moin. And that's a pretty that's the place where you just help me to actually build it for Suyash. Suyash, tell me one thing that with all this innovation and our access to space launch capabilities in a cheaper as well as much reasonable time frame, how does it actually help companies like yours or many more satellite operators to play, or rather be more time sensitive, be more fast, be more agile, and you don't have to wait for next opportunity for 10 years.
Yeah, so I think again, the story goes back to ISRO's and NASA's of the world, and other space agencies where they used to launch a satellite which was of a size which can be of a Volvo bus, very big, very big bus kind of satellites. Also, they used to do everything in a geosynchronous orbit, where they used to take the satellites in like around very very higher orbits at around 36,000 kilometers and all. But things are now coming down, and people are miniaturizing the entire satellites to do a very very specific job. And I think the the launch vehicles which are getting 3D printed, as Moin and in fact other companies also are doing it real fast to do the launch. They are making it more available. The launch slots are more available in comparison to what it has to be there like 3 years for 4 years back. Apart from that, there are a lot of there are a lot of people who are there in the ecosystem who are doing one part of the job. So someone is really good at building solar panels, someone is really good at building batteries, and we all are as a space community, we are coming together now very fast. Also, India taking its own leapfrog step here to do privatization in space is a big welcoming step. Someone like me who is just graduated from college can now enter into space without thinking about too much of the regulations and all of those things. So everything will fall together in line as time goes ahead. But what is important is, if we can build a similar thing how Silicon Valley does it for softwares, can we do it for space? And I think there are a lot of people who are innovating to make it more cheaper, more affordable. And in fact, Narayan is also here in the panel, who has a marketplace called satsearch, where someone like me can actually go and really do a system design, find components, and put it together as a bill of material to buy and build a satellite. Now, there are a few other things. I think it is very important to understand, why do you want to build a satellite? So if you know your mission very well, I think people are there, enablers are there. So ultimately, satellites leads to the applications. But to build a satellite, there are enough resources, be it the components or the launch vehicle, which is already there. So I think if you're clear about the mission, it's possible to build a satellite now.
That's a good question which you raised yourself, is that why do you want to build a satellite? So tell me
Yeah.
something more about, the downstream applications, of the capacity which you are building up in the space, and what you are doing on the ground in terms of processing of that data to make it actionable and usable.
So I think I'll answer this from the perspective of GalaxEye. Uh, what has happened so far is, people have built one censored satellite. Someone has built an optical satellite in Earth observation. Someone has built radar satellite, or someone has built some other sensor satellite. Now the point is, most of those satellites, be it optical, multispectral, hyperspectral, or radars, have been used for scientific purposes and strategic initiatives more than anything so far. Only one or two people have done good commercial activities with the satellites so far. But our initiative is more inclined towards making it available to commercial people as well. So we come from a concept of autonomous vehicles. How autonomous vehicles take lidars, radars, and camera and fuse them together to do a comprehensive decision making, and to do a comprehensive analysis to make a decision. Similarly, we are replicating that kind of mindset and framework in the satellite itself to come with an extremely comprehensive data set. Now that will be very very useful for downstream applications. So just to add, uh, optical sensors or multispectral sensor, which is just like cameras of our phones, capture images from different parts of the world. Now, there are a few problems in doing that because it's so far away. You need to have bigger optical cameras and all to see through, to see at a particular area for a particular resolution. And then the other thing is, at night time or when it is cloudy, it's very difficult to do that kind of imaging. Now, when you go to radars and all, It can do nighttime. It can penetrate clouds as well. So now we need to understand, whether agriculture is craving for that data set, or mineral mining or mineral extraction folks are craving for data set. So if the end user requirements are clear, then we can understand which data set, and we can basically curate those kind of data sets through satellites to serve them. Now there has to be a two-way effort. It's a chicken and egg problem. We can build more and more satellites to get more and more data, but then the geospatial community should also do more and more use cases on top of the data sets, so that we handshake very well there.
Thanks, Suyash, for presenting your perspectives. So let me move forward to Narayan. I think Narayan is someone who has tons of experience in this field, and he runs a company which is satsearch, and satsearch is something a kind of marketplace. So a marketplace where you come and see almost every kind of a stakeholder of a space industry. So Narayan, can you just tell us a little more about how is this whole space upstream and downstream is connected and collaborating to make an impact in our living?
I think it's a very important question. Ultimately, let's do it by example. I guess that's the easiest way of doing it. When you take a country like India, for example, and you look at how, for example, uh, farmers are financed and the evolution of how farmers have been financed in this country for many, many years now. At some point of time, even about 10 years ago, like 30 to 40% of the lending to small and marginal farmers in India was very still socially based, without financial institutions actually lending to farmers, and instead people depending on their own social capital to get that at very high interest rates. Right, so that has a direct effect on the viability of those farmers, bankruptcy of farmers, ultimately farmer suicide, and also sustainability of agriculture in itself. So now, when you look at why don't banks really have the confidence in funding small and marginal farmers, it's a data issue, because at the end of the day, banks give out loans to people who want to buy houses, they give out loans to people who want to build businesses, they have, give out loans to all kinds of things, right? But why can't really banks really look at financing confidently small and marginal farmers? And ultimately the question is there a model in which credit worthiness and risk model can be built for these communities, in which lending can be then be a statistical analysis rather than anything else, right? So when you look at it from that perspective, space and satellites can be one thing that they can actually reveal a lot of the ideas and create that risk model for bankers, for example, right? So you have satellite data available for the last 30 years at least, and you can go back to that time frame to know how land has changed, how people have started using land differently, for example, right? So with that, for example, you can then go on to build a model that can tell you if a particular farmer is coming from rural part of India, the coordinates of his farm, for example, and you can always go back and check what is the productivity of that farm has been over the last few years, to know if there is real farming activity going on, how much is productive is that for a particular farm, what is the kind of crop that has been grown, what is the yield out there, and so on. And you can then start building a risk profile of the particular location and the particular farmer themselves. So which means that we are at a time when these kinds of applications are happening, also because the cost of the data is coming out, the availability of data is growing, the cost of computing all of that data is coming down, which means that ultimately business models will only work when all of this is anyways passed on to the customer at the end. And at the end, if the cost of satellite imagery is $1,000 per 100 square kilometers, and the processing cost is another $1,000 per 100 square kilometer, and you find out that nobody can bear this cost at the end of the value chain, there is no use of building satellites. So yeah.
Hi, Narayan, thank you. That's great that you connected this whole value chain with farmers, and which is at the bottom of the whole pyramid. And that's the end of the user applications. Uh, for the delegates, I think this was a great first round of conversation where we started from the innovations taking place into the launch vehicles, and then go to the satellite building and the satellite data processing capabilities, and then Narayan presenting together a kind of view of applications and in the how it is actually helping us to make our decisions better based on the quality data which we get from the space. Let's move forward into the next round of discussions that what's actually specifically taking place in India and worldwide. So, in view of all this, reforms which we have seen in India, Narayan, do you think that this is the time for us to actually, encourage more and more Indian entrepreneurs to build solution capabilities and applications? What exactly is the big message you want to give to the Indian space community?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think we are at a cusp when India has the talent pool, the infrastructure, the availability of all the kinds of resources, as well as the problems that needs to be solved at the same time. So, which means that you have a potential of basically modernizing society in one way or the other, and essentially space is another tool. We've really seen what happens when telecommunications get opened up. The effect of the whole telecom revolution and the technology evolution today and the data costs that it has driven down to over the last 20 years or so, it's very visible, right? And space is nothing less as well in that sense. So if we are able to address the problems that are native to our culture, because at the end of the day, it's very hard for an American or a European to understand what is the problem that a small farmer in India faces, or a fisherman in India faces, or some infrastructure developer faces. There's a very big cultural gap as to how those societies work and how our society works here. So at the end of the day, we will need to encourage our own people who understand our own problems, and then can put together the technology stack to then say we're going to solve it for India at a price point that works for India, in a workflow that works for India. And the fun thing about that is that once you do that, you can take that to Southeast Asia and Africa and Latin America and many other places where the problem set and the price point at which people want to get that solved may be very, very, very similar, right? So it's about the discovery of all of this. And ultimately, I think that I would love to see people quit places like Infosys or Wipro or TCS or so on, who actually understand enterprise data, enterprise solutions, come from that background and step into the geospatial economy and say, I understand what enterprises want. I understand how productivity can be created in the economy. Now I want to combine that with satellite data and geospatial imagery and all of these kinds of things. And we will combine these together to solve problems for both businesses and for people at the same time. And that's where I think there's an incredible amount of opportunity in the country.
Yeah, that's pretty much a very interesting thought which you are sharing, Narayan, about calling the professionals from the mainstream IT companies to look at this sector. And I think that would help building applications and enterprise applications which would improve the productivity and efficiency of our development programs, both across government and business enterprises. Just for a kind of information to the audience, that there's a direct connectivity between telecommunication industry and the space industry, and one of the biggest coalition company known as OneWeb is heavily invested by Bharti Airtel and various other telecom operators. And while we move into the 5G era, a lot of low Earth orbit, constellation of communication satellites is going to improve the capability of communications and that kind of capacity, which will help you provide faster, bandwidth. So the kind of analogy which Narayan brought in terms of the opening of telecom sector and opening of space sector, I'm very convinced that that's something which is going to happen. Let's move forward, specifically to talk about. I have a question also in the chat box from someone that, hey, he says that is the year 2022 be seen as the year of space technology in India. What do you say about this, Suyash? You are one of the startups from IIT Chennai, and you just came from the academic institution. You found this different, this whole atmosphere different.
Yeah, I think it should be, and in fact, I won't say 2022 is the year. It has started a while back. Probably Narayan is one of the first movers in the entire space tech industry for India. But yes, 2022 seems to be one of the years, and the following years also will become even more eventful for our country. I think the entire value chain, there are a lot of efforts and initiatives, be it from the satellite or launch vehicle or ground stations or analytics or even in communications like OneWeb and all. So yes, there are a lot of efforts now. This year and probably the next year will materialize all the applications together, and so that we become more strong space nation in terms of how private companies are taking it up. So yeah, I think it is going to be there.
Swiss, I can imagine your, kind of, like maybe very conservative thoughts about it, but at the same time, space is a very long-term game. Don't decide things in a year. It's a very long-term business, uh, industry. So, how do you see Narayan, the globally the space industry? I'm told that this is about $350 billion industry worldwide at the moment, and I read one of the reports by the U.S. Department of Commerce that it's going to be $1 trillion economy by 2025, something like that. Can you just tell us that where is this industry going to be in 3 years' time or 4 years' time?
I mean, that's a million-dollar question there itself. So, because at the end of the day, I think people have poured in 15, 20 years of capital today in realizing some of the new technologies or new products for across the industry, right? But I think from my sense, it's better to look at what new problems will we be solving to seeing how we are increasing the size of the pie or how we are creating productivity in the overall, economy of the world. Because at the end of the day, if we are doing that, then of course the size of the pie is growing at the end. So when you look at it from that perspective, you look at communications, there's about 3 billion people who are not connected yet. Almost 50% of people in India don't have broadband connectivity. So what is the value of providing broadband connectivity to 50% of India and 3 billion people around the world? And how could it be financed or how could it be enabled is a interesting question that people will probably tackle in the next 3 years, having now the technology in place. When you look at low data rate connectivity with respect to having farms connected, precision agriculture being supported using IoT and things like that, or even otherwise companies and even people being connected using low data rate stuff. I'll give you an example. I think one of the companies in which is Bangalore based called Skylo is deployed an IoT system that connects an IoT sensor on from a soil where they can derive soil samples within 10 minutes using IoT based SATCOM, where these farmers had to wait 2 weeks to get a lab result from a state-owned lab, for example, right? So these are all things that have a deep impact on the economy in that sense. The same with all the decisions that need to be made with enabling lower levels of risk. I already gave the example of farmers. So you look at what companies like Aqua Connect or Numerate or others are doing in India. They're enabling a whole host of fishermen, to get linked to the potential fishing zone areas, connecting that to the marketplace in the overall sense. So it'll always be a holistic solution. The thing is, space, nobody fascinates about like saying technology. Technology fascination will not get you a lot of value at the end. What really gives a lot of value is actually when we connect that to productivity of the people at the end, right? So I think space will always be like the back door that not many common people will know that it exists. Like 150,000 ATMs in India are powered by VSAT terminals, right? How many Indians do actually care about a space terminal being at the back of an ATM? Nobody cares. They care about just going in there, drawing their money and getting out. and they hope that it works. So I think at the end of the day, we have to be that backdoor that nobody realizes that there's an infrastructure that is running and that is creating productivity at the end. And I'm sure that if we are able to significantly address a lot of the problems in ESG related problems and climate change related problems, look at problems in India like health, water, air quality, all of these things, right? So if we are able to use space to target a lot of these kinds of problems, I'm sure that there is enough to go around for hundreds of companies.
So, Narayan, I think one thing which I really appreciate about you is that you keep us connected with the ground in terms of applications. So, which is great. That's what is at the end of the the whole tunnel. Looking back to the statement which the Prime Minister of India gave in 2014, sometime in November in the Vigyan Bhavan, that let there be no space between space and people. I'm not sure whether you heard of that, statement from him. He concluded a valedictory session by saying that let there be no space between space and people. And for that, what Narayan you have been consistently focusing upon is the applications on the ground and capacities to develop applications, solutions, integration of the workflows and enhancing the productivity and efficiency uh, of the programs. So now my question is that since this sector has traditionally been the government led for last 50 years, it is actually 50 years exactly of Indian Space Research Organization, which was founded in 1969. After 50 years of government driven, government controlled, setup, suddenly we are now open to commerce or commercial sectors. Uh, how much time do you think it will actually take to build that kind of environment, and what is needed by the government in terms of encouragement to the entrepreneurship? Is there a need for a something like a space fund? Is there a need for some kind of nurturing and handholding the companies? What could be expected, which could work in democratization of applications?
Sure. I think we can always go on with a long list of things that we want the government to do. But I guess I'm a very big believer in people organizing themselves in a country like India. At the end of the day, and I think the only thing that we can look forward to with the government is that there are not many restrictions in enabling commerce. I mean, of course, keeping in mind the security requirements of the country or other things, right? So obviously, I think there is enough capital around in the country that is available today. I mean, Suyash and others have also raised significant amount of funding over the last few years. So I don't think so. Capital is a very big constraint unless and until you have good ideas and you have a good team and a good product at the end. The real sense of all of this is actually enabling conversation between the states because of the federal and the state government nature of the whole
I love
ecosystem,
that.
right? So which means that there are applications that the state can be a catalyst to, and look at how do you use space as a part of your either I would look at it from this perspective, right? So either you look at space to create more tax revenue for yourself as a state or government or a central government, or you look at space as a part of your saving tax money as a part of your state or central government. So when you look at saving tax money, it means you're using it for disaster management or forest fire control or flood control or
Yeah.
responding to earthquakes or things like that. When we look at earning tax revenue, it could be how do you actually integrate these into your revenue departments. Like for example, you want to integrate that into collection of taxes in cities for monitoring construction activity. It could be looking at taxes in other ways in which the government or revenue intelligence, or it could be forestry based intelligence. It could be a lot of these things, right? So I think the discovery can happen there, and if government departments can actually open up to the requirements of how they could be modernized, and entrepreneurs like Suyash and others can be exposed to those demands, the overall country would benefit tremendously at the end of the day, because the government would be, more productive, and it would have a gain for itself. People would get more jobs. There'll be more investment in the whole sector, and so on.
So I get your point, and I think that's very valid that the government has done enough in terms of public policy reforms. Now we're moving to the sector that where since the government is the largest consumer of the information as well, probably some kind of more long-term project planning would really help create the bigger demand for this industry. So Suez, you just tell us something more about how are you actually able to make a difference with this whole environment. Just give me in 2 minutes because we're just left with 3-4 minutes around that.
No, I think I would say a lot of things are coming from the ecosystem itself. A lot of people have done things, so it is very similar to how internet has grown in the past 30 years. So when people started with www or HTTP protocols, Google and Yahoo's of the world built on that, on top of it. And then when Google and Yahoo came, then Ola's and Uber's came on top of it. So I think it is very important to do an exponential change. We can't rely, or we can't go ahead and say that 60 years or space tech is extremely difficult, or it has been the government's game at the end of the day. So I think it has to decouple a little from space agencies, be it either on the demand side or on the manufacturing side, on the supply side. It has to commercialize a lot, and I think the key to this is making people more aware on daily basis of how space applications can help them.
Thank you very much. So yes, in fact, in next 2-3 minutes, what I would like to do is to just touch upon the concluding this panel. So I know in this panel, what we discussed about is the broad space infrastructure and its connected value chain. It's of course a space, so it's technical. It's definitely technical, but its applications are very, very simpler. Its value in our living is in a simpler manner, and we actually don't realize, as Narayan told about it, that we are actually using the space capability behind ATM machine, or we are using a space capability while driving our car, or we are using a space capability while ordering Zomato or tracking a delivery. So it's almost everywhere in our life today, and especially in the COVID times. But let me tell you that space capability and the scientific equipment in India has been there because it's primarily physics and mathematics. And we have great, scientists in our industry, or we have great, mathematician in our company, in our country, and there is no reason why we should not grow this industry to be almost 100,000 crores in next 7 to 10 years. And it's not just growing that industry to say 100,000 crores, but actually making almost 15 lakh crore impact in our economy. That impact is almost 15 times to 20 times because of its enabling productivity embedment. And that productivity is very, very important, for any kind of governance or any kind of businesses. I want to just say that strategically, this is a very important sector for the country. In fact, the reason I'm talking to you is the fact that I did my master's and MPhil in international uh, politics of technology transfer. And in the age of Cold War, when this Cold War ended, Russia stopped supplying space capability to us, and America was anyway not a friend of us. So Indian scientists in 1995 to 1998, when they had no technical capability being imported from foreign partners, they actually built IRIS-1C, which was at that time the best commercially available resolution of satellite imagery. So what I'm just trying to say that it is very, very doable and very possible, and we have a great future for our country. And then we want to salute our industry and our public policy champions for actually opening up this sector and making us a space empowered nation. With this, I would like to conclude this session and thank you to Suyash and Narayan as well as Moin. And thank you to Digital India for inviting me for this conference. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of you for being at this session and having such a wonderful discussion. Thank you to all the delegates for joining India Digital Summit. Stay tuned. We have day 2 as well at India Digital Summit. Please rejoin tomorrow.
Thank you. Have a great evening.